Thank you everyone for coming to the North Central University Psychology Association webinar. Dr. Goodin will be presenting today and I will turn it over to him.
Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Joel B. Goodin. Today I'll be speaking about the Goodin method for optimal learning. Be deliberate with me today. Be conscientious about hearing my words and processing this information. Allow me and help me to apply it to your own life. Today I'm talking about operationalization or optimization or expertise. To me, they're the same thing. Similarly, learning is really a type of performance. I want you to perform today as you learn from what I have to say. You won't get it all. Learning is a human, imperfect process. As I present about optimizing your ability to learn or train with information, I'm keeping in mind that you are two types of students, sometimes both at once in the same day. You are learners in course rooms, soaking up content and performing with assignments. Others of you are writing dissertations or faculty writing papers, grading papers, or performing research. All task performance can be optimized. Today, I'll share with you the history of improving performance and what we know. I'll reward you for listening with my method for putting all the pieces in place to get the best results of your daily and long-term learning. I want to make your learning motor run faster and harder so your academic roads are smooth and even enjoyable. So here's what you may have experienced growing up. Old school was kind of tame, what the education we grew up with. Now there's way more noise. We're not dealing with the academic environment that we experienced. Today we have sort of a Wild West education with cowboy learners. There's more ease of access to information, but it may not all be healthy. In recent years, learners' relationship with content and media has been changing. Students refuse videos longer than 4 minutes. 41% of time is spent without personal satisfaction of getting anything done, even though they're trying to. Learners are interrupted about every 5 minutes. They seek just-in-time information from their smartphones, websites, online courses. Information access became easy, but so did engaging on a superficial level. We spend about 11 hours of time on media each day, shifting attention between smartphones, tablets, computers, about 21 times per hour. We're online 27 times per day. Out of 7.83 billion people, our students are more than likely to have a smartphone, be frequent internet users, and active social media users. Social media users numbers jumped by more than 13% over the past year. I think we all know why to some degree, with nearly 500 million new users, taking the global total to 4.2 billion by the start of 2021. On average, more than 1.3 million new users joined social media every day during 2020, equating to about 15.5 new users every second. This is the world in which our students live and learn on a daily basis. Remember missing a phone call? Mom would say, if it's important, they'll call back. So what is important now? All the information reaches us all of the time, every time. It's sifting through what is important and what is not that is the hard part. Students live online 7 hours per day. We even work and learn online now. There's very little quiet time or built-in time for outdoor activity or movement of any kind, except for maybe PE and K-12 education. There is an off switch, but it seems so strange that we would use it, that we would turn off the internet. We use it from waking to sleeping, before we get out of bed, in bed before we close our eyes, on the toilet, constant entertainment, almost no rest or time for reflection. So how do we know if our life is going well? And what are we learning? Who remembers your parents saying, get off the phone, your brother needs to use it, and you need to vacuum the house? Well, those days are gone. Your brother has his own phone now, and Roomba is vacuuming the house. Our students are constantly connected. connected to people not even in the room. Learners differ by region, but the US is about average in internet use and social media use. But distractions abound for learners. 7 hours per day online, there are endless ways to spend time online connected. By 2030, experts predict an internet of senses where we can hear, smell, taste, touch, anything digital. An online environment where our brain is the user interface. If we want to search, we think about it. Online and offline will merge beyond the point of meaningful separation. So there's lots of possibility, but lots of work for our brains to process in different and new ways. The future of education is online to stay, personalized learning, and the teachers will become more of a guide. Distractions will peak as online and real worlds merge, and learning and performance has to be protected in this time. I want you to think of learners as their own teachers. You are your own teacher. What are we competing with in order to obtain the information we need and exclude the information we don't need? Who can curate this information for us so that we know what is accurate, and who can help us evaluate the use of the information sources? We're overloaded, overwhelmed, oversaturated, and a teacher can guide perhaps more than ever, not just being a presenter of information, but a curator. The information is there, but who will teach us to think critically about it? To conceptualize optimized learning and performance, I've pulled from all of these fields of psychology and will continue to build upon it in my future research. So just as in sport, we might look at a golf swing to tweak it, to hit the ball harder and further. Can't we help our learners perform better? Positive psychology advocates studying the best experiences that individuals have in order to understand how to promote them more frequently. So I pull largely from Erikson's deliberate practice theory, Anders Ericsson, where deliberate practice defined by high-level expertise says that deliberate practice predicts performance. I'll share more about that. Yet few studies currently apply deliberate practice to education and academia. Now, you may have heard of Erikson's 10,000-hour rule in Malcolm Gladwell's famous book, Outliers. It suggests that it takes about 10,000 hours of training or practicing or learning time to become an expert at anything. Unfortunately, Gladwell didn't really emphasize, maybe one of the most important parts is that you have to be spending that time training in a deliberate practice way. Erikson defined deliberate practice as goal-directed activities requiring high levels of effort and concentration with the aim of making specific improvement in performance. Erikson studied individuals at a music school, violinists, finding that those that spent the most hours in deliberate practice were the best players. The best players were found to practice in a quiet environment, free of distractions, at full concentration, focusing on weakness and performance, engaging in routines. Deliberate practice has predicted performance in chess, spelling, medicine, Scrabble, golf, music, darts, typing, soccer, and pretty much anything else. So, could deliberate practice be used to develop measures of study habits among college students? Can it translate to academic learning and performance? We need a better understanding of what deliberate practice has to offer, and I'll get into that. But I also want to build on other relevant learning factors. What research to date has addressed academic deliberate practice? So Jamie Talk was a student of Erikson's who I worked with in grad school, a friend of mine. His dissertation was on one of the first forays of deliberate practice in academia. His key findings were that quality matters more than quantity for study time. Studying while focused and free of distractions is the productive use of study time. Using effective study strategies is related to increases in grade performance. Developing a daily academic routine will increase performance in college courses. Now, I've done some research on this myself. I developed and tested an instrument to measure 4 key aspects of deliberate practice that have pretty good psychometric properties at this point: focus, feedback, effort, and regimentation. So, should we rethink how we use our time to study for courses? And which of these should we conclude? I have a bad memory, I'm not smart enough, or I have a bad strategy. Only one of these conclusions offers any opportunity for change and growth. So would changing our habits increase academic performance? In the next steps, I'm going to consider factors like cognitive and emotional machinery, motivational factors and effects, cognitive enhancement, emotional enhancement, the context in which we learn, and performance strategies. And after reviewing that information, I'll offer my method on how to pull it all together into an optimal plan for learning and performance in education. I'll start addressing additional factors with regard to cognitive and emotional machinery. In Baddeley's early model, humans were thought to attend to information, maintain it, elaborate, encode, and retrieve it. Although long thought to be limited and finite, working memory is mutable. We can grow our capacity. One way is through deliberate practice. Media multitasking interferes with attention and working memory. So keep in mind that sensory information can fade easily in less than a few seconds, if not attended to, or it can be pushed out by distracting stimuli. We'll need a plan to protect ourselves against distractions. Working memory capacity predicts school performance years later. Furthermore, working memory in preschoolers has been shown to predict future risk of dropping out of high school. Working memory can be improved to show better academic performance years later. If we can get information into our long-term memory, we might just remember it on the test, and maybe for a long time. With regard to intelligence, those who have talent succeed if they utilize those talents. Individuals with higher intelligence tend to process information more rapidly relative to those with lower intelligence. Many studies have confirmed that intelligence positively predicts academic performance. Of course, SAT scores correlate with academic performance in higher education, and intelligence substantially predicts academic achievement. Emotional intelligence is composed of 4 branches: perceiving emotions accurately, using emotions to facilitate decision-making, understanding our emotions, and managing them to upregulate positive emotions, downregulate negative emotions. Self-rated emotional intelligence was a stronger predictor of grades than standardized test scores. Conscientiousness is the personality trait characteristically aligned with mindfulness and deliberate practice. It involves a detail orientation, thoroughness, and follow-through. And it's related to academic performance with a medium-sized effect compared to smaller effects in relation to agreeableness and openness. Piaget pointed out developmental stages at which he believed humans have certain cognitive abilities. Information processing accounts, however, of cognitive development began to replace Piagetian accounts. So now we can use brain imaging neuroscience to understand executive functioning. Developmental cognitive neuroscience research has shown how early environmental deprivation affects the development of particular parts of the brain. And the first years of education have an enormous impact on future cognitive development. We can view the time we have or spend learning, or just time in general, in terms of duration or succession. Time duration is unpredictable though. How long will a task take, especially a task we haven't done before? It helps to view our progress in time as sort of a chain of events. This way of thinking can increase productivity. Huseman and Lenz's future time perspective had 4 components: valence or valuing being the importance of future goals. It's tied to adaptive, motivating behavior and delayed gratification. Connectedness is the usefulness of present activities to reaching those future goals. It's tied to planfulness, concern for the future, and predict student achievement. Extension is the temporal closeness of goals, how far away they are into the future. That's tied to goal specificity and clarity and the importance of the goals. Speed is the pace at which time seems to be moving. It's tied to planfulness and anxiety. Non-intellective factors like study habits, skills, and attitudes rival standardized tests and previous grades in predicting academic performance. Study motivation and study skills show the strongest relationships with GPA and individual class grades. Academic performance is about only half explained by aptitude, so we have about 50% to work with. A familiar theme that you'll hear throughout this presentation is that study quality matters more than quantity. So how can we improve the quality of time spent learning or training or performing that 50% that we have to work with? Next, I'll discuss motivational factors. Think of motivation as the fuel for effortful learning and performance. Keller was a professor of mine. He suggested that we gain and maintain attention, focus in on the content. We must determine the relevance of the content of our academic goals and our lives generally. How is this information relevant to my future? We must build confidence using feedback loops with ourselves, self-testing, and get expert feedback to know if we're on the right track. If we can get past the performance task orientation, we might enjoy learning. A key component of Bandura's social cognitive theory is self-efficacy, which is one's confidence in specific future tasks. Self-efficacy beliefs predict effort in the form of performance and energy expenditure. Bandura found that students with greater self-efficacy were likely to participate more eagerly, put forth more effort, persevere for greater durations, and remain emotionally stable when encountering difficulties. Self-efficacy predicts motivation and learning. It affects persistence and achievement. It positively impacts academic success, and it leads students to strive toward higher goals. Self-efficacious students take more positive risks and are more likely to take on difficult or challenging tasks. Higher self-efficacious students performed better despite equal ability. Finally, self-efficacy with goal setting better predicts scores than the SAT. Self-determined motivation, as described by DC and Ryan, contributes to the positive functioning and behavioral and well-being outcomes of learners and people in general. DC and Ryan suggested that learners have psychological needs in the form of autonomy, competence, relatedness, each tied to student motivation. Supportive autonomy meets student psychological needs satisfied and encourages them to study for self-determined reasons, which are associated with higher learning performances. And they differentiated between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation being, I'm doing it because I enjoy it, because I love it, because I'm engrossed in the material and I like it. Extrinsic motivation being doing it for the grades, for the rewards. Some of my friends in growing up, I don't know if any of you experienced this, but they got paid for the number of A's they got. Self-determined motivation is tied to positive educational outcomes. Goals are conscious cognitive processes that are the primary determinants of what we do, our behavior, and thus they're integral to motivation. Goals are directive. They direct our attention and effort toward activities that are relevant to goal completion. Goals affect performance through discovery, arousal, and the use of goal-relevant strategies and knowledge. Goal setting is common in long-term educational pursuits, and goal commitment is tied to persistence in long-term processes like graduate school. Goal setting doesn't motivate or lead to performance unless there's goal commitment. Obstacles can diminish performance levels despite ability and motivation. Situational constraints like lack of resources, time, money, and information interfere with an individual's performance motivation by decreasing expectations for success. Research by Early found that knowledge and information about how to reach a goal increases goal commitment. As chairs of dissertations, some of us can sometimes provide the big picture to the students that can help them understand the utility of the task at hand or the iterative process generally. We can share the knowledge to increase commitment. Mastery goals are about mastery content, while performance goals are about performing well on a test or assignment. Mastery approach goals positively predict goals through challenge seeking out challenging goals and pursuits. Similarly, a fixed mindset differs from a growth mindset. Fixed mindset is defensive and cautious. It's tied to learners' fear of failure. They feel that their intelligence is fixed, and no matter how hard they study or how differently they study, they won't perform better. But within a growth mindset, students persevere, they seek mastery despite difficulty. They believe their intelligence is mutable. They can improve it. They can improve their skill sets. Duckworth took this and said that persistence in the face of challenge is called grit. When students persist, a growth mindset develops, thus improving grit to overcome future challenges. So if we practice getting through hard times, we become better at it. Grit predicts academic achievement. Motivated performance situations can be appraised as challenges or threats. We must appraise the situation as self-relevant and that we have sufficient resources to combat the challenge. Resource sufficiency is determined by our feelings of self-efficacy, our perceived control over the situation, and the type of motivational goals that we're pursuing. Higher perceived control and self-efficacy with approach goals elicit a challenge state, which is motivating to us. In terms of appraisals, we think of locus of control, a theory in personality psychology referring to the extent to which individuals believe they can control events that affect them. The locus of control of a person is conceptualized as usually either internal or external. Those who believe that their own behaviors determine the positive reinforcement they receive and that they have control over their own lives are said to have internal locus of control. Individuals with an external locus of control are those who believe that the results they receive, like on a test grade they don't like, are due to fate, luck, external circumstances. These individuals attribute their circumstances to environmental factors. Individuals also perceive that things will remain stable or not, and can be changed or not. And of course, if things will eventually change for the better, or if they can be changed by us, then we're likely to have more hope and optimism. Locus of control predicts academic achievement. And you'll notice I'm always tying in, does this predict academic achievement? And so hopefully just listen to that theme throughout the slides. Here I discuss two theories of motivation, expectancy value theory and control value theory at the same time. Motivation is conceptualized as a product of either expectancy or control with value. So value describes students' evaluation of the importance and usefulness or utility or instrumentality of the course task and how it's related to achievement in the class or toward the program in general or the degree. Expectancy involves individuals' expectancies for success, subjective task values that predict task and activity choice, performance, and engagement. Control, however, involves achievement emotions that depend on perceived controllability and valuing of the outcomes. Operant and classical conditioning are also relevant to optimizing learning. Operant conditioning is a conscious type of process. When using this, you should avoid self-punishment. Reinforcement is more effective than punishment. Optimize your reward processes. Be strategic with your reinforcements. Be realistic, be feasible, and follow through on reward plans that you make. Implement your rewards consistently, just like you would parent a child. In classical conditioning, we're using more of a subconscious passive strategy. We can trigger our arousal. The body and mind are alerted and prepare for work with our posture, with caffeine, sitting down at our desk, turning on the lights. This is my spaceship for working. So whenever I sit here, I know that I'm in work mode or presentation mode in this case. We cue our mindset and we prepare for flow. Calm and mitigate our erratic thoughts through breathing, mindfulness. By always preparing with the same gestures and routines, the brain will actually self-configure into the best mode to solve a particular kind of task. Next, I'll discuss emotional enhancement. Self-regulated learning strategies are actions and processes directed at acquiring information or a skill that involve agency, purpose, and instrumentality perceptions. Self-regulation is tied to self-efficacy and academic success. To achieve academic excellence, learners self-regulate and maintain academic goals despite difficult academic tasks. In terms of emotion regulation, self-regulation is tied to our academic emotions. Emotion regulation predicts academic success and productivity. Psychological flexibility is the ability to stay present and regulate our emotions and actions despite unpleasant feelings or thoughts. It's tied to emotional intelligence, mindfulness, which is accepting the present, life management, mental health, and performance effectiveness. It is value and goal-oriented, promoting engagement in unpleasant, difficult processes. And we perform better when these processes are aligned with our goals and values. So it predicts satisfaction in performance, improving performance and well-being. Hope predicts psychological flexibility and academic success. Decreased optimism is associated with decreased goal commitment. Optimism is tied to the use of approach coping strategies. Optimism is tied to success and performance. Of course, if we don't have hope, we're not going to be motivated to succeed. If there's no chance of getting a better score or of finishing the dissertation, we become demotivated and eventually we burn out. Mindfulness is a characteristic of mental states, emphasizing observing and attending to current experiences, including inner experiences, such as thoughts and emotions with a non-judgmental attitude and with acceptance. Mindfulness as a psychological strategy improves emotional regulation. It improves cognitive and emotional awareness and emphasizes focus on present moment emotions. How do you feel right now? Mindfulness improves attentional skills. It activates our internal resources, which ultimately enhances the learning process and academic performance. Next, I'll discuss cognitive enhancement. Nomophobia is the uncontrollable fear of feeling disconnected when you're unable to access information or contact others with your smartphone. It generates physical and psychological stress. It causes decreased executive performance and working memory capacity. We don't think as well without our phone, apparently. Cell phones are addictive. They lead to problematic use in many cases. And they have effects on performance. Media multitasking negatively affects GPA. Device use reduces attention and academic performance. Dividing attention while learning through tablet, laptop, smartphone may not reduce comprehension. That's interesting, but it does reduce long-term retention of classroom content. Working memory can be improved by chunking of multiple similar stimuli as one unit. Shallow processing, like rehearsal strategies, has poor academic outcomes, whereas deep processing leads to understanding of academic information and predicts academic performance. Elaboration and organization of information, focusing on deeper processing and thus a deeper understanding of learning material, involves learners using their own words and ideas to expand on a concept in a way that relates it to their own experience and understanding. Thus, students engage the content at deeper levels and are likely to remember the information and retrieve it later. Erickson's student, Jamie Talk, studied recalling information versus redoing it or relearning it. He said that relearning involves rereading notes or text. It increases familiarity with concepts. We're familiar with, we remember, oh, I remember reading that. Whereas self-recall involves attempting to bring back course material from memory. It has substantial memory benefits through cue establishment. It prioritizes recall and not just familiarity. Recall or retrieval practice results in medium or large effects on learning and performance benefits. The distributed practice effect, spreading out our learning instead of cramming the night before or doing an assignment at the last minute, appears to be most beneficial for mastering fact learning like word recall, vocabulary, secondary language learning, text comprehension. So one key idea is to avoid thinking you know things, but you don't actually know. By recalling and retrieving information, we're able to separate what we thought we knew from what we really know. Now, if anyone in the audience feels overwhelmed or overloaded, you can follow up with me. I know this is a lot of information, and sometimes it's too much at once. That's why we spread it out over time, like distributed practice. Cognitive load is this idea that suggests that the workload or the weight of effort required of our mind in processing information can be high or low, and sometimes too much. Learning is optimized by facilitating learning of germane content while minimizing extraneous cognitive load. Affordances can be viewed as relationships or opportunities in subject matter environment systems and can be perceived uniquely across individuals. When information is presented without overloading, cognitive load improves academic performance. Metacognition has been defined as cognition about cognition, thinking about our thinking. Metacognition enhances student performance. Metacognitive knowledge and activities are part of effective learning. Metacognitive strategies enhance and sustain academic performance. Self-management or self-monitoring, these feedback loops that we can build for ourselves, are one type of metacognitive activity that can enhance both academic and social performance. Next, I'll discuss the context in which we learn. We need to maximize the signal to noise ratio. The signal is the important information that we really need to learn. The noise are the extraneous factors and information. We need to promote generative strategies for ourselves as we learn, like elaboration. Generative strategies place more of a responsibility for learning on the individual. Write concisely. Although it takes more effort to write with fewer words than with many words, concise writing is a straightforward way to reduce our cognitive load. It also helps us process the information, distilling it down into what is most important. Provide scaffolding for yourselves or your students. Provide cognitive aids, checklists, worked problems as examples, a quick reference, glossary, concept maps. Context-dependent learning suggests we have superior retrieval when external context of memories matches the retrieval context. So Duncan Goodin and Alan Baddeley provided an example that had divers memorize words underwater or on the beach. And those who had learned underwater remembered what they learned better when they were recalling it underwater. And those that were on the beach when they were learning retrieved that information better when they were on the beach learning instead of underwater. In terms of educational implications, students tend to do slightly better on their exams when tested in the same classroom in which they learned the material. Or even chewing gum while studying can affect, if you chew gum while taking a test, it can improve performance. Social media multitasking significantly negatively predicted academic performance in a study by Lau in 2017. Academic performance has decreased in studies related to text messaging, Facebook, answering, laptop use. Sensory processing is fragile to some extent. Remember that information can fade or be pushed out by distracting stimuli. So we need to protect ourselves from distractions. Talk found that time spent studying with distractions was negatively related to GPA. The Premac Principle is a specific form of operant conditioning. A preferred activity can be used to reinforce a less preferred one. So I like to think of using it during the process of learning. I might study under a shady tree or at Starbucks with my favorite drink. Avoid rewards, though, that distract from performance, like listening to music. Perhaps for me, it's with words. I need to listen to ambient music, classical, or what's called post-rock, which is still invigorating and energizing, but no words to distract me. Otherwise, you end up with lyrics to a song in your dissertation review. So next I'll cover performance. Effort is the time and energy that students expend in meeting their academic goals. Differences in effort are tied to prior effort and achievement. And agency or volition causes us to expend effort when motivation may not be available. Students' effort is related to academic achievement, of course. Carroll believed that learning is a product of accumulated learning time, a function of time actually spent learning over the time we should have spent learning. But learning time has not been shown to improve academic performance. It's incredibly hard to improve GPA by adding study time. Time management skills and study time are associated with GPA, but additional study time of 1 hour per week resulted in only a 0.025 GPA increase. While aptitude and class attendance are associated with GPA, student effort was not substantially related to GPA. Learning time is negatively correlated with individual course grades. The Pomodoro Technique uses intervals to allow a sense of conscientious control over time, a feeling that we are controlling time rather than time just passing us by. A common Pomodoro plan is to have 25 minutes of focused work and then 5 minutes of rest and reflection before beginning another interval. I use 4 intervals at a time, which is 2 hours. The technique requires a plan that you can estimate and modify in terms of time and effort as you proceed. Employ primacy and recency effects. You remember things you learn first and last, the best. Prioritize the urgency of tasks. What is most important to learn this week or today? Break big tasks into smaller tasks to avoid more than 7 Pomodoros or intervals per task. It resembles mindfulness because we need to protect the Pomodoro while we're using this 25-minute interval of focused work time. Make note of and reschedule any interruptions. Protect that time and then use the 5 minutes to reflect and use later times in the day to work on those interruptions and following up on those. Record your progress and interruptions for easy continuity and evaluation. Next, I'll discuss flow and clutch states. Flow is an optimal experience similar to the runner's high and being in the zone. You might recognize this guy on the screen if you're as old as I am. Flow is defined as an enjoyable experience characterized by concentration and an absorption in a specific activity to the exclusion of irrelevant thoughts and emotions and a sense of everything coming together or clicking into place, even in challenging situations. It involves effortless attention, positive feedback about progress, like crowd noise, cheering, and automatic, effortless experience. Clutch states also involve superior performance but it involves a person under pressure. Clutch involves complete and deliberate focus, heightened awareness, and intense effort. In clutch, the athlete or learner must be aware of that pressure, have the capacity to experience that stress, must perceive the outcome to be important, and must succeed largely through effort. Both flow and clutch states involve enjoyment, enhanced motivation, perceived control, absorption and immersion in the activity, confidence, and sometimes an altered perception, like an altered sense of time slowing down. Deliberate focus is the product of concentration with self-discipline. Concentration is our alertness within the context of our scope of attention. Let's break it down. Alertness consists of mental energy and awareness. Scope of attention is the measure of how narrow or wide our funnel of awareness is, focusing on what is relevant versus like the whole book versus the key points. Knowing what to learn really helps. Self-discipline consists of the habits we develop and our ability to honor commitments and endure discomfort. And motivation serves both as the fuel and enthusiasm, helping us emotionally amplify our performance, fully engaging in tasks and persevering when times are difficult. The top athletes have an individual zone of optimal arousal, and I would suggest learners do too. And this zone of optimal arousal is the zone in which best performance occurs. If we value learning or performing, we feel that it matters, and therefore we feel stress to do well. If we don't value something, we don't perform at high levels. Conversely, if we feel overwhelmed with pressure and stress, we feel restricted, uncreative, make or miss the free throws at the end of the game when we're 1 point behind. Rather than a growth experience, we often choke. Thus, having something matter a moderate amount is the sweet spot where we perform at our best. With regard to resilience, the ability to bounce back uses coping and adapting to adversity and change. It can buffer people from the effects of stress. It's tied to academic adjustment and performance. Students' psychological capital, like resilience, mediates the effects of academic engagement on academic performance. When thinking about academic routines, remember that time to forget is important. The chance to forget. After recall, we actually remember better if we're forced to recall it with some amount of struggle. If we're allowed to forget, we have a clear understanding of what we really know versus what we thought we knew. Time management is tied to self-regulation and academic success. Erickson's study found that high-performing violinists had regimented schedules, more regimented than lower skilled violin players. The best violinists typically practiced in the mornings. And Tak, Erickson's student, found that more regimented students had higher GPAs. His regimented students set up a time when no distractions were present, were more likely to study in the morning, and used spaced study versus cramming. Delayed gratification or front-loading refers to working hard now to experience future benefit. It is a learning strategy tied to the use of cognitive strategies, self-management strategies, and motivational tendencies. Relevance matters here. Students willing to delay gratification for the sake of future academic rewards perceive classroom-related tasks more favorably or useful than students unwilling to wait to experience the reward. Students strategically, voluntarily postpone gratification to enact academic rewards that are temporarily distant in the future. Remember connectedness from future time perspective. They're temporarily distant, but highly valuable. Delayed gratification predicts academic performance. Pang was one of the first people that I read that talked about the need for rest in our lives. Humans, he said, have approximately 4 hours of creative energy per day. We must rejuvenate. We must allow our subconscious to do some problem solving. Implications mean taking walks, conversing with each other, using the remainder, the non-creative hours of our workdays for more task-oriented activities. We benefit from the passive processes that our minds engage in. And we can enjoy creative solutions like having those great ideas we have in the shower, or conversational breakthroughs where we have great ideas by working with each other and conversing. We need rest. Now, I'm going to recap deliberate practice, 4 main items. We need focus. We need to be effortful. We need to get feedback on how we're doing and adjust. And we need a routine for doing all of our learning. The Goodin method of optimal learning, or GMAL that I'm calling it for now, has implications for study, for socializing, and I think for life, and many aspects of formal and informal performance and interaction. I'll talk about materials needed, preparation process, and follow-up. So we need to minimize the materials, bringing essentials only to our study environment. Bring everything you need, but not the stuff you don't need. Evaluate your learning environment so that it's distraction-free or at least minimal. And announce your study time early. Tell other people, hey, I'm going to go study. Please don't bother me. That's sort of a lockdown strategy, or boundaries. Premac pairing can be used to enhance the context, having that favorite coffee or whatever, favorite music. Use classical conditioning to train the brain for study time. Operant conditioning builds balance, build in rewards for yourself. In terms of preparation, collect the essential materials, target and implement a good environment, set day goals and expertise goals. Now, these are proximal goals and distal goals. Distal goal being the final goal that we want to accomplish, and the proximal goals being the goals along the way. If I want to lose 50 pounds this year, I better start now, and I should focus on losing 5 pounds per month. Those are distal goals, those monthly goals, or sorry, proximal goals each month that lead to my overarching distal goal. So set day goals for yourself. What will I accomplish today to reach expertise in the long run? Plan Premax for yourself, rewards, and off time. Approach instead of avoid. Challenge. Perceive things as challenges instead of threats. And if you feel yourself viewing something as a threat, think about it. Prepare your mindset to think about it differently. Master and perform. And embrace the suck is something I heard recently from Joe Rogan, I think. Embrace the challenge. Enjoy knowing that the strain of the pain that your mind is doing, or if you're exercising, the pain your body feels, and the sweat, that means you're actually learning. So embrace it. My process involves focus, build, flow, work, wrap, reflect, plan, and relaxed phases. Focus is a sort of warm-up or physical and mental readiness. Send out that in-session signal, or ISS, to everyone saying, I'm off limits during this study time. Check to make sure you have your materials, and use a focus mindset. Mindfulness for about 10 to 20 minutes will help you get started. After that, jot down any extraneous concerns to handle later in the day. Repeat a mantra or perhaps a prayer, whatever you like to do. Orient to the plan and to the content at that time. Jot down or summarize the first goal and the overall goal. Then begin. In the build phase, begin creating, understanding new information by developing new associations of knowledge. Use 4 Pomodoro intervals to build a foundation. During the engage or green phase, implement a creative building mindset. Consume new information, develop knowledge and understanding of material, build associations, and tie into your pre-existing knowledge and experience. Then in the yellow or pause phase of 5 minutes, ask yourself, what am I learning? How is my pacing? Do I need to modify during the next interval? Do I need to adjust my course? In the flow stage, it's similar. Use 4 Pomodoro intervals to flow into deeper learning. During the engage or green phase, implement a creative flow mindset. Focus on enjoying the process of learning. It can be fun, I promise. Fully engage with the content to process at deeper levels. Consider the implications of the information. Explore the new information's meaning at a higher order or metacognitive level. During the pause, ask, what am I learning? How's my pacing? Do I need to modify during my next interval? During the work phase, use 4 Pomodoro intervals to work toward evaluating learning so far. This is when you switch to more of a performance mindset instead of a creative mindset. Remember that you've used about 4 hours so far, and that's what Pang suggested is the amount of creative energy we have during a day. During the engagement or green phase, implement a performance or work mindset. Focus on summarizing what was learned before. Draw or compose mental representations. Evaluate your own understanding of the content. Highlight main points and must-learns. Identify areas of deficiency and difficulty. When you pause, ask, am I crystallizing or solidifying my knowledge? How is my pacing? And do I need to modify during my next interval? During the wrap phase, use 4 Pomodoro intervals, again, to wrap up the day's learning. This is the last set of intervals. During the green engagement phase, implement a performance or wrap-up mindset. Use recall tasks and testing to solidify current knowledge levels. Draw or compose mental representations. Evaluate your own understanding of the content. Use quick hints, looking back, relearning tasks to fill in deficit areas, and test overarching and detail knowledge. During the pause, engage in mindfulness meditation for maybe 5 to 10 more minutes because you're not going into another interval. Next, spend some time reflecting. It involves content and process reflection. Qualify your understanding of the content you've covered. Reflect on whether you covered the most important content. Determine areas of strength and accomplishment and identify content areas that require further deep learning. In process reflection, review your performance for the day. Evaluate your pacing and your handling of obstacles and interruptions. Explore your emotional and physical experiences throughout the day. Consider how the process worked for you or didn't work during the day, and identify modifications that you might need to your process. Document your progress toward your overall expertise goal. Then plan. Plan involves day goals and expertise goals for the next day before beginning. You've also done this hopefully the day before you start your learning process. Day goal plans involve listing strategic content learning needs for the next day. Determine a process for approaching the appropriate content matter. Quantify intervals needed to achieve each goal and sub-goal. Detail a timeline approach to the next day goal progression. Ensure your agenda has no really obvious flaws in it. Examine a day goal instrumentality to reaching that expertise goal. And then in terms of the expertise goal plans, reflect on them. Detail is needed to progress toward your overall expertise goal. Modify your expertise goal plan to accommodate what you've progressed so far, your current levels of knowledge and understanding. Finally, relax. Tie up your loose ends first. Revisit the interruptions that have not been addressed from throughout your day when people tried to talk to you, emails came in, texts, everything. And then disengage from your work section of your day. Set boundaries around your playtime is what I call it. Engage in playtime next. Thank yourself for your hard work of the day. Celebrate the progress you've made. Implement any reward plans that you are due. Enjoy creatively different hobbies and tasks. Make notes of any to-do ideas that come up for work. Protect your playtime from work that may interrupt. You can do that when you go back to work. Finally, focus on the crystal balls. We're all juggling things as we work, as we learn, as we're students, faculty. We're juggling rubber balls and crystal balls. And the rubber balls in life are the things that we're trying to do everything. And if we drop them, it's okay. We We were late to a meeting. We missed a meeting. Maybe it's forgivable. It can be fixed. We make all sorts of mistakes all the time. And when we're juggling so much, we're likely to drop a rubber ball. It doesn't break, we can pick it up. But the crystal balls in our life are the people, the relationships, the wives and husbands and the children, the basketball games and music recitals. If you don't attend and engage in your marriage and with your children, you can lose these things. So these are the crystal balls that can drop and actually break and shatter. And they may be really hard to put back together. And sometimes you can't. So focus on the crystal balls and their importance. Be deliberate in making sure you put effort into the relationships in your life. In the follow-up or process review, adjust and modify processes as needed. Learning and performance journals can help you sort of understand where you're accomplishing, where you're being interrupted, modifying the overall plan. Finally, make sure to get expert feedback from a professor, faculty, mentor of some kind that can help you adjust your overall approach. Am I on the right track? Am I learning the right material? At this time, thank you. Are there any questions?
Thank you very much, Dr. Goodin. So we've got about 30 minutes here for questions from the audience, whether that's students or faculty or anyone who wants to talk about any of the really interesting information that's been presented. Okay, well, if nobody is thinking anything right off the bat, I will go ahead and ask. So if you had to distill all of this information into like a 10-point list, that's like, these are really the most important things that you want to start working on right now to sort of begin the optimization, would you be able to pick just, 5 or 10 or?
Right. No, that's a good question. I know it was tons of information. I wanted, before I presented the plan, I wanted to sort of share everything that I felt was relevant, and you probably picked up on the everything part, but I threw the whole kitchen sink at you. And I'm sorry, I overloaded your cognitive load. In terms of 10 things, I don't know about a number, but I'll try to keep it brief. I'd say, really focus on quality over quantity of learning. If you're not deliberate, if you're not really engaged, then you're probably not going to get much out of it. It's not quality learning. I'd say that's the first thing. Control your time. Be planful, be mindful. That's another part of being deliberate. The things from deliberate practice are sort of, I think, the most important to apply to academia and academic learning. Focus, effort, getting feedback even from ourselves. Build in feedback loops. Check on yourself. Stop every now and then and say, okay, I've been working really hard. Am I actually accomplishing what I want to accomplish? Sometimes you realize you've just been staring at a page for like 10 minutes, right? So focus, effort, feedback, and using a routine of some sort. That's one where I'm a hypocrite. My routines are strange and not consistent throughout the day. I do have leisure time in my model. Yeah, that's another area of hypocrisy. I don't have a lot of leisure time in my life. I think a lot of us maybe are hypocrites on that, but I'm working on it. And these are things to work on. They don't seem obvious. Like what we were taught growing up was, I think that at least what I thought was, if I study more, I learn more. That makes sense. But we have to make learning hard enough. We have to struggle with information to really encode it so that we can retrieve it later. I don't know if that was 10 things. It wasn't itemized.
No, that was really helpful. I personally like more information rather than less. So I thought it was really great presentation. I like it's for those of you who are students, it's kind of the same thing that I love about reading a student's chapter 2. You've already done all the hard work. You already synthesized and put together all of the, the most recent or most relevant research. And then I just get to benefit from the presentation. So I really liked it. I just thought, in terms of, for people who are looking for a first step, and they don't want to necessarily commit. And I think you've given them that. Absolutely. And just, I know I learned, the longer you sit there and the more you concentrate, the better it'll work. And of course, I also learned way back in the day. Well, I guess it was that long ago, but things sometimes come later to the Midwest than they do to other places. So to us in the early 2000s, like using the internet for anything was still fantastic, and dial-up was still key in South Dakota. So we just didn't have any real information about, just learning differences. We didn't even have, we had a special ed classroom, and then that was kind of the extent of, like, some people learn differently than others. That was about it. So I really like all this focus on, it isn't the same for everyone. These are things that you can do to help yourself. You've got this huge range that you can work with. 50% of your achievement is sort of, in your hands. You can optimize it in whichever way works best for you. I think that's sort of aspirational.
Zoanne, I wanted to respond. Thank you for your question. Yeah, it sounds like, and I've got so much more planning material to do. I think once you have a plan in place, it becomes faster. But the idea, Zoanne, is really just being mindful, having a plan of attack. I always tell my dissertating students, hey, if you start, trying to do your study without having a good problem statement that is justified, then you're headed 50 miles in a direction. It may be a good direction, but probably not. There's thousands of other directions. So the idea is just to prepare and to be thoughtful and decide what your goal is before you start just studying. And that helps you stay on track and stay focused while studying. You don't necessarily have to, as Dr. Ackerman said, you don't have to integrate all of these ideas the very first time, but you can sort of build it into your life and your learning.
Dr. Goodin, this is Patrick. That was a great presentation with, as you say, a ton of information, and you touched briefly on the 10,000 hour rule. But it strikes me a lot of our dissertation students have at least 5,000 hours already under their belts when they arrive to NCU, because the topic that they want to work on is usually something that they've had experience with in their lives or at their workplaces or whatever. Would you say that's true, and that they're sort of ahead of the game in some respects when they arrive at NCU?
By the doctoral level, it obviously differs by individual, but yeah, I mean, I think they've got a lot of experience. It may not be focused exactly on a
Yeah, so that's the trick, how to use that life experience to then wed it to scholarly study habits and research habits in a way to produce a very high quality product. And a lot of your work here, your information here should do just that, help students capitalize on what they already have to take it to the next level to do a great dissertation.
Right. Hopefully by the end of the dissertation, or maybe within a couple of years after the dissertation, a student has reached that sort of 10,000 hour.
Yeah.
I mean, I really don't like the quantity issue,
Yeah.
but it's because it's an average, but we are.
And after all, as I recall, Gladwell in his book, I mean, his examples didn't really make sense. I mean, he cited some band I've never heard of, the Beatles or something, as exemplary of the 10,000 hour rule. So how could he be right? You know?
I think, yeah, Gladwell just sort of gave a very basic understanding of Erickson's work. Erickson's really not that great of a writer. It's very dense. It's just hard to read, and you may have experienced the same thing with this presentation. I'm sorry if you did, but
Oh, no, it's a great presentation. Thank you
it's
very much.
heady, it's dense material, but it all fits together and basically says make associations, make sure the information is relevant to your life. And in terms of the experience that you bring to a doctoral program or a master's program, you know, try to understand how the new information you're integrating is relevant to what you've experienced. We've all got different histories and experiences. How can we build on that and integrate this new information? And so that the expertise we have, the experience so far in life, is useful as sort of to springboard us toward reaching further and more specific expertise. Eventually, we're going to get down to a specific type of study like psychology, or even a type of psychology. You're welcome.
Dr. Goodin, it's Zoanne.
Hello.
Hi. So Dr. McNamara had a really good point in terms of extraneous learning, how to make that fit with what we already know when we come into these programs. Somewhere along the line, there is an awful lot of what I would consider extraneous material in the doctoral process that may or may not be necessary. So as a student, we would be spending a lot of our time having to learn things that really are not germane to our final goal. How do you, in your method, say, okay, I have to learn this for a class that I really don't care about? Am I wasting my time? How? I'm not explaining myself very well.
I think I understand.
Do you know what I mean? It gets frustrating. You put a lot of work into the process of learning, and yet it's not learning that we'll ever use again. Not to say statistics. Oh,
Right, or algebra and calculus.
yes.
In high school, we're often like, I'm never going to use, a lot of people say, I'll never use this. Why is it important? And some of that feels like a performance goal. We're ticking a box. We're getting the grade that we need. And educational programs are imperfect. They're built so that you get this foundation of knowledge that is supposed to be important. Now, is it all going to make sense of how it relates, or will it ultimately relate to your ultimate goals? And absolutely not. It's like, I've studied so many things. Even in graduate school, I've studied many things that have nothing to do with what I'm doing now. Like, for instance, I've got 2 master's level counseling degrees. I'm not doing counseling, but guess what? When I'm a dissertation chair or SME, it helps to know a little bit about like working with people and some soft skills. And some of you may be like, well, you don't have any, but I try, right? You have to manage people a little bit. You're helping students manage their own emotions through the process. When they look at you and say, should I quit? It's helpful for me to have a little bit of background and to say, it's going to be okay. We'll get through this together, and use some of that. So I would say that you get the foundation, you try to tie it to future goals, and sort of understand the relevance, but you don't always understand the relevance at the time. And sometimes I assume I'm going to get to the end of life and say, I did not need algebra, or whatever. I'll pick out a few things and say, I didn't need that. But we do our best.
Of course. And I like the take the information, hold on to it. You may need it. If you don't need it right now, don't despair. It may be useful down the road. Is that kind of where you're saying? Okay. because I like your method, and yes, you gave a lot of information, but I'd rather have a lot of background too. So I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Zoe. If I present just the method, then you don't know why I made it up. Why is it made up? And hopefully, once you saw the method at the end, you understood why I covered all the information before it. The point is, the method is built from all the knowledge I covered.
Absolutely. It's the dissertation. You have to have chapter 1 and chapter 2 to finish up at the end. Right, Dr. Ackerman?
Is Dr. Ackerman here?
She's nodding her head. I'm laughing at her. But yeah, no, I see what you mean. And I do appreciate the background, because it does make the method make sense. So, and I don't mean to take up so much of the time. I'm sorry if other people have questions.
I think you're fine.
Hey, Dr. Goodin, it's Joni.
Hi, Joni.
Hey, thank you for the presentation.
Thank you for listening.
I wanted to just say that you had me from the old school slide. I have turned in a partial draft of chapter 4, so I'm kind of I was at a place where I could take a break, and I will admit that I'm not very good at taking breaks or doing the rest piece of your method. But it just kind of struck me today. It was very timely, because what I chose to do in my little bit of a break was to rerun some wiring that was done in my house when we built it 25 years ago. Mm-hmm. And there were landline cords, and there were ancient cable TV cords, and we live in a long house, so it's not really very easy to rewire. So I was sorting through all that stuff, and I won't bore you with all the details, but I have these 2 new surge protectors, and so I had to diagram out how I was going to plug everything back in and get my label maker and, label all the cords. And it's just been, it's really been fascinating to hear your old school talk when I was just participating in some really old school activities today. And I would be remiss if I didn't say some of us really like stats. So I think that's very useful and should always be left in school.
I agree.
Thank you, Dr. Goodin.
Thank you, Joni.
For those of you who hate stats, if it makes you feel any better, I hated stats when I took the class, but now that I actually get to do stats, I love them. So you never know what's going to happen.
I just wanted to say thank you, Dr. Goodin, for that presentation. It was excellent. It resonated for me on so many different levels. My topic interests, strategies I can use, awareness of any splinter skills I might have in pursuit of this. So I just really wanted to let you know how much I appreciated your presentation. Thank you for respecting our time and condensing it down. Have you written any books? My whole screen is taken up. I know I could look this up on my own, but I'd just like to know where we can find more of that, more on this.
I am this will probably become a book, putting it all together and sort of presenting a plan. And this was sort of recently, honestly, a colleague suggested, hey, it was not a colleague at NCU, but somebody I meet with, and said, hey, you know a lot about those things you're saying. You should pursue that in terms of like presenting it at different places and maybe write a book, do things like that. And I said, okay. And then Dr. Ackerman reached out for this speaking opportunity, and I said, okay, I guess I'll get that started. And I started trying to put all the pieces together. It's not perfect. There are some things that could have left out or emphasized more. And, it takes tweaking. We grow, right? And so hopefully you see that even in your professors. We're full of mistakes, and So I'm putting it together. It's going to get better, hopefully. If you have ideas, just get in contact with me. I'll probably need some help in doing research.
Awesome. I'm
Let us
sure
know when the
people
book
will
comes
love it.
about.
Thank you.
Thanks to Donda. Now everyone's muted.
That seems like it might be all the questions. I think your timing actually worked out really perfectly because you still got 15 minutes to spare on the meeting. So unless you have any concluding remarks that you'd like to make.
Do your best. Don't, if you're feeling overwhelmed, take a breath, pause, take what you know about mindfulness and apply it to learning. Just be thoughtful and be in the present when you need to. And at other times, reflect on what you're doing in life or learning and say, is it working? So that you can change it if it's not working. For life, that may be a therapy session. For learning, that may just be time you spend with a mentor like Dr. Ackerman. Somebody smart. Okay, thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you so much, Dr. Goodin. This was fantastic.
Thanks, Dr. Goodin.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. My pleasure.
I'm trying to find my recording. All right.